Hey, so Chris Carter here, talking about moving tips. So I own a moving company, and it's almost 10:30 at night. My wife, who owns a salon, she's a colorist, was just talking to me and telling a story about one of her clients. Either she or a friend or something hired a moving company and hired a cheap, right? Took the cheapest price moving company. It was like $500 or something, right? Something silly. And it turned out to be one of those horror stories, where mover gets there, they get most of the stuff on the truck, then they say it's going to be $1,500, and then when they get to the destination, it's going to be more, and then it goes into storage, and now it's going to be more. And we're talking like $4,000 that this company's up to from a $500 estimate. And literally, earlier today I made some content and of choosing how to choose a mover, and cultivating accurate estimates. So literally today on my mind of red flags and things, and the things that happen in this industry to customers. So I just figured, let me put some things out there when I add some content. So this is a random last minute little shot, but I'm going to do it anyway. So here you go. Things to consider, right, when you're choosing a mover. Red flags. So if you put your name, you go online and you end up putting your name in, and all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of phone calls. You put your name in, you become a lead. Other moving companies are buying that information. So you're going to get, these companies have paid for the stuff. Everybody's in a hurry to be the first person to call you back, and they try to close you right away. And they'll do anything to get that sale, right? Because a lot of the paperwork for, in this industry, the paperwork, you sign something, it's not necessarily binding. There's a lot of loopholes. We also have brokers, so they'll, just basically a sales company, and the salesperson probably gets 30%, 33% of whatever they sell, whatever they sell you on, and it's not really that important to them if it's accurate or not, because they're going to take your move. They're going to sell you a job and tell you you pay $1,000, whatever, and they don't care if it's a $3,000 job or not, because they're going to give that information to another company. That other company is then going to go show up, and they get to your door and say, hey, it's $3,000, right? These things happen usually when a customer is not paying attention, right? If it's too good to be true, it is. So when you're making choices and you're looking at the different options of moving companies, some things to consider. It's so funny, I'm tired of saying a lot. Just because they're a big box, right? So the franchises and the names that you might know doesn't mean that you're going to get great service, right? And just because somebody used that same franchise in a neighboring city or town, they got bad service, doesn't mean that you're going to get bad service, because they're individually owned, they're franchises. And a lot of the big boxes, since they have a big name and they have a lot of numbers, I know in my area, some of the big boxes have cheap labor. They pay their guys hourly, a low amount per hour. Some of these moving companies are known in our area to go to a town called Delray, where there's a lot of alcohol rehab, a lot of rehab centers, and they get the guys right out of rehab. Because those guys don't have any, whatever, they're just working. A lot of companies pay, hourly. So let's say you're making $20 an hour, and you come in and you only work 4 hours that day. That's $80 after taxes, $50. You can't really live on bringing home $250 in a week. And those guys will monetize their lives usually, sometimes by stealing your stuff. So red flags are estimates that just don't seem realistic, right? So if you get 3 estimates and they're all plus or minus $1,800, $1,500, $2,200, right? and then you get a 700 or 1100, take that low one out. Take it out. It's just not good. You know, in this industry, I tell people, either you're going to invest on the front end or you're going to pay on the back end. And when you pay on the back end, it's so much more. It's usually it's theft and damages and things, and the paperwork that a lot of these companies have, get them out of responsibility. So red flags, really, really low estimates. If you're asking questions and you see these paperworks, I've seen estimates that have like a couple scriggle lines and that's it. But the back side of that estimate is like littered with small print. That's a red flag. If you ask your salesperson or your estimator some questions and they kind of give you vague answers, that's a red flag. Depending on what the answer is, some answers are vague and some are not, right? Is my glass covered? Yes or no? Well, yes if you do this, and no if you don't do this, right? That's not a vague answer. Let's see, what else? What other red flags do we have? Just because a company has a nice, pretty truck, pretty commercials, doesn't mean you're going to get good service. And on the other end, somebody that's small, they don't have beautiful, website and commercials, doesn't mean you're going to get bad service, right? My company, Peace of Mind, we're small, I'm boutique. I got a couple of trucks, a handful of guys. My guys have been with me for a long time. I pay very well. Because I keep men that I can trust and that work hard, and it's costly, right? So, and it's worth it. It's pricey. It's worth it. Pricey is not costly. It's worth the investment, and it's a high investment, but it's also a good return. Biggest thing is recognize where you found, where you got that company's information. And who you got it from, right? If they mailed you something, if they called you, if they reached out to you, do a little bit more research and just keep an eye out for, I never close, on a phone call. I never do an estimate and want people to sign right away. You know what? That's high pressure. I don't do that. I'm going to go visit you. I'm going to talk to you. We're going to do our estimate. I'm going to give you time. If you haven't responded in a couple of days, I'm going to call you. You know what? I want you to have your time to sift through your options, do research on us, ask around. We're not pushy to try to make that sale, make the sale. Here's something that happens with the red flags. So these companies that will give you a low price, right? Let's say everybody else is $1,500 and they said $600, and especially if it's a weekend. What happens a lot, I get a lot of customers, that people that will call me and say, my mover never showed up, because they gave you a $600 price, and then a week or two later they get another opportunity to do a job for $2,000. They're all of a sudden not going to be able to do your job. It's just that mindset is in this industry. A lot of the responsibility lays on the moving companies, and some of the responsibility lays on the customer, right? Because they will choose the low that low estimate, right? So those of us who have higher estimates, we now have to compete against, we call them road movers. No insurance, no this, no that. They don't have the costs that we have to be legitimate. So if the customer doesn't realize that, sooner or later we have to play a game that we're losing, because everybody's going to the cheap ones, right? It's kind of a weird scenario. It doesn't really matter. Just pay attention to, is that price actually realistic? Where did you get them from? Are they high pressure sales? Are they pushing you? Here's another one. Here's a big red flag for me. Some companies will say, hey, we need 50% up front, right? When I need 50% deposit, only pay in cash. The money's got to be there before we offload the truck. Look, if you're a local move and you're going from A to B in the same town, and you have a company that says, you have to pay before we offload the truck, it's kind of scary. It's kind of fishy. Now, I will tell you what happens is, there are plenty of times where we will, do a move for a customer, not us, but other companies. I've heard the stories, right, where they unload and then the customer decides they don't want to pay. So, we're not like a roofing company or a contractor where we have liens against your property. We have no recourse other than trying to take it to small claims court, and then over what, $1,000, it's gonna be more time, right? So there are customers who will get their stuff and then not pay, right? The reason we don't take checks is checks bounce. What do you have? American Express, stuff like that. So there are plenty of customers, and depending on where you're at in the price range, the lower, for me, we don't really play on the lower end, because that's where a lot of the fraud, I think, happens. But also, you just gotta pay attention. Anyway, moving tips of the day: pay attention to the red flags, because they're gonna get you. This video probably isn't gonna be uploaded. I don't think it's too long. I was all around the bush. Oh, I'm tired. But I just, oh God, it pisses me off to hear those stories. Somebody else taking advantage of. It's just, and customer chose the cheapest freaking move, and you know what? They're gonna get what you're gonna get. Move with peace of mind, and you're worth it.